Hey, what's up everyone? Dragging back again here to tell you that you should be watching Godzilla vs. Destroyah. So Godzilla vs. Destroyah is a 1995 kaiju film directed by Takao Okawara, and basically is the end of the Godzilla Heisei era of films, even though that's kind of a misnomer, because technically the Heisei era in Japan, which is the era in which a particular emperor kind of resides upon, recently just ended at the time of this recording. But the series of films that came after, starting in 1999 and ending in 2004, were known as the Millennium films. So in terms of when people refer to the Heisei era of Godzilla films, they are referring from the Return of Godzilla, which is in 1984, which technically was still the Showa era, all the way up through Godzilla vs. Destroyah. So basically, those films are what people mean when they say the Heisei era of Godzilla films. So, and this was the climax, the closer, and it is considered by many to be one of the greatest Godzilla films ever made. Some people put in their top 5, others put in their top 3. I lean kind of towards the latter. I think it's just that good of a Godzilla film. Actually, not even just a Godzilla film. I mean, for Godzilla films, definitely top 3, but it's just a damn good film. If you're a fan of just cinema in general, you can definitely appreciate this movie, both thematically, visually, spectacally. This one kind of has it all. So it is the end of like I said, the Heisei era of the Godzilla films in terms of this continuity. And it is essentially the kind of the Requiem Godzilla film, Godzilla's swan song. This Godzilla in this continuity is the second Godzilla in history. The first one being the original 1954 Godzilla, which was destroyed by the oxygen destroyer. So this is the second one to appear in history in terms of this continuity. And this is the demise of this Godzilla. This Godzilla has absorbed essentially too much radiation. His body is fed too much, and is now at the point of going on a nuclear meltdown. This kind of visually represented by having his body kind of with this orange glow all over, like he's burning, and it has been dubbed Burning Godzilla. And in this film, Godzilla also has baby Godzilla, or Junior, which is his adoptive son, which he, during the course of the Heisei era films, he kind of encountered another Godzilla, or a juvenile Godzillasaurus that, due to being close to proximity, absorbed enough radiation and started to undergo the transformation that turned him into a Godzilla. So essentially, you're seeing kind of a teenage Godzilla in this film too. And without spoiling too much, Godzilla is forced to kind of it essentially suffers a loss in this film, which, you know, up to this point, Godzilla has really been viewed as kind of this almost malevolent force of destruction, when in actuality, he is kind of the response of kind of humanity's misuse of technology, misuse of nuclear weapons. That he is essentially, you know, a force of nature that is the response, you know, to an era of nuclear technology. And we have harnessed this awesome power that nature had to rebalance itself and create Godzilla. Godzilla is, you know, the balancing force. He is a force of nature that is nuclear powered. And now Godzilla he is dying. It's just his swan song. And you realize in this film that he is a character. He is someone who has been not only just powered, you know, physically by nuclear energy, but emotionally he is essentially powered by rage and anger. That most of his life, that's all he's known. It's just this burning fury, no pun intended, that really, when you're seeing kind of the burning motif, yes, it's a direct result of his body having absorbed, again, too much nuclear energy, but it's also kind of a visual metaphor for kind of just taking what is inside and putting it on the outside. That Godzilla is just this ball of just rage and anger and just primal fury, that he cannot live a life of peace. He does not know how to live peacefully. He is doomed to forever just be rage incarnate in a way. So you realize just kind of the tragedy that is his life, that is his legacy, so to speak. By the way, if you see the camera shaking, it's because this little missy is trying to get our attention. So, do you have anything to add real quick? No? Okay, well, just wanted to check. She was bumping into the thing, so I figured just, give her a little screen time. But I digress. But yeah, so it's kind of the tragic moment when you realize that Godzilla is almost a Shakespearean figure, and that his life is one of tragedy, that he is born to essentially never know peace, and that it makes sense when you think that he is the result of mankind harnessing the most destructive weapon possible, that we have harnessed nuclear energy and we've turned it into like a destructive force, a weapon. Therefore, Godzilla is, the byproduct of a weapon. Therefore, how can he know joy? How can he know peace? But he has kind of gotten a taste of that through his son, so to speak. His son is essentially born indirectly from the same force, still has this nuclear power, still is this nuclear power being, but was not created directly from a result of it. That he is essentially kind of not so much afflicted, but so much born of it. So for him, it's a lot feels more natural. And you see the personality in his son is different. He's not like his father. So really, any good that was in Godzilla has kind of been passed off into this other Godzilla. Now, this other Godzilla will inherit essentially his legacy, his throne, but will not be burdened by kind of the psychological shortcomings, for lack of a better description, of his father. His father is just, is just too scarred, both inside and out, where his son kind of has all his power, but none of his shortcomings. So his son is a true kind of heir to this, throne of being the king of the monsters. Now, this film is called Godzilla vs. Destroyah because Godzilla essentially has to face his doomsday. And I say that because if you're familiar with Superman, there was a famous comic book series, comic of the death of Superman, where Superman fought against the character Doomsday, which was kind of his antithesis. It was kind of the anti-Superman. If all my DC reading friends have explained it to me correctly. If not, don't be mad at me, blame them. But essentially that is what Destroyah is, because in the original Godzilla film in 1954, Dr. Serizawa, who created the Oxygen Destroyer, killed himself because he wanted to take with him to the grave any and all knowledge of how this technology came into being, because he felt that if a nuclear weapon created Godzilla, something as destructive and dangerous as Godzilla, the Oxygen Destroyer is a more devastating weapon than the nuclear weapon. So what kind of monster will the Oxygen Destroyer create? And he only wanted to deploy it once, and when he did, it was to destroy Godzilla and himself and any record of how the weapon was created. However, in this continuity, that one time was enough to create another monster. It infected a series of microscopic organisms that began to grow and form in a very Legion-type fashion, becoming the monster, the Kaiju Destroyah, which looks like a giant cross between, kind of the Western, rendition of like the devil or a demon mixed with something almost draconic. It looks basically like a giant demonic devil dragon. It just looks like bad news all around. He's bigger than Godzilla, more powerful than Godzilla, and emits, this oxygen-destroying power that is, again, designed to be the antithesis of Godzilla. So everything about Destroyah is meant to be the anti-Godzilla. So something that can repel Godzilla means you have created a monster more terrible than him. And that's what this story is about. This is Godzilla's, again, this is his swan song. This is his final bout. This is, it is going to take everything he has to destroy this final foe. And in doing so, it will destroy him, because battling this foe, pushing himself, will further the self-destruction of his own body. Throughout the film, they're trying to freeze him, they're trying to subdue him, they're trying to basically buy themselves some time to find a long-term solution before he melts down. But the more, extraneous activity he partakes in, it kind of just speeds up the process. So Godzilla fighting this final enemy will literally be the death of him. I mean, granted, he's doomed anyway, but this is going to speed up the process. This is literally going to physically kill him. So it's just dramatic and very emotionally charged final battle when you realize that literally Godzilla knows he's dying, and he is just giving into the rage, giving into all of that which has plagued and burdened him, and just embracing him and becoming just this unbridled force of just destruction, more so than he's ever been. His physical presence is just destroying the world around him, and he is just going to become annihilation incarnate, and that's what he needs to become to defeat Destroyah. That he needs to become an even more destructive weapon than he already is, and it is both awesome to see because visually speaking, it is amazing. It is essentially the equivalent of Godzilla going Super Saiyan, but it's also heartbreaking because you realize that he is dying, and he is dying both physically and emotionally because in doing what he's doing, he is just allowing any kind of sense of sentient mind, any kind of sense of self be consumed by just madness. And at the end of this film, when you see him, and again, spoilers, I don't want to try to do this, but this is the end of the High Sierra for a reason. Yes, he does die. Like I said, this is his requiem, this is his swan song, but it's important to, I don't think it's a spoiler saying that because it is a part of what makes this story so special. And knowing that going into it, like even I did, it doesn't hinder the viewing experience. It actually heightens it, I think, because you realize that even in the face of certain death, Godzilla cannot be deterred, will not be deterred until his last dying breath will be the most destructive monster ever and possible. But in his final moments, you see him just succumbing to just, not just anger, but pain. You realize that as he is dying, he is crying. It has just been a lifetime of just anguish and just turmoil and, just rage and pain. And that he is just finally breaking down. His final moments, he's finally just giving into it, and he's allowing himself to just let go. And you see him just writhing and roaring to the sky and just losing it. Basically, just in this moment, this is probably the freest he's ever been in this moment. And it's sad because to feel that free, he has to just give into pain. And you realize just what a pain-stricken character Godzilla in this continuity in fact really is. So it is a sad moment when you see him go, but on the same time, it's also comforting because you realize that in that moment, his pain, he's done. He is no longer suffering. If his entire existence has been suffering, it's over. He no longer has to suffer. So it's a bittersweet moment because bitter in the sense that Godzilla's gone, but sweet knowing that by this point you've come to love him and you've come to respect him, and then you realize that this is the best thing for him, that sometimes when something is suffering, it needs to be put down, or it needs to be, you have to just let go because ultimately there's no joy in its life anymore. And that is Godzilla by the end of this film. All joy is gone. All good in his life is been annihilated. And so he needs to go. He's certainly not doing us any favors by existing. But you realize it's putting an end to his misery, and that if really there was any being in this world that deserved that, it was him, because he was born of pain and suffering and anger and destruction. And we did that to him. That the greatest gift we could do for him is to allow him to kind of go quietly into that good night, even though he does not do so quietly, and just let him go because he suffered enough. So it is a very moving, a very touching kind of film, and it's a nice cap off to this continuity of Godzilla films, to realize that what we love so much about him was what was making his life a living hell, and then you almost feel a little bit guilty for loving him for that. But then it's a nice cap off. And again, like the various franchises, Godzilla, just different continuities, different timelines. So just because Godzilla died in this film doesn't mean the character's gone forever, because they started up new continuities afterwards, and the character is still going. So him as a character transcends any one continuity, but this iteration of the character met a very necessary end, I feel. But the film isn't a complete bummer, and that's what I won't spoil for you, because his demise does lead to something pretty awesome. I will say that, and that's all I'll say about that. It's a kind of a weird turnaround where you have a really sad moment, and then it's followed up by something that makes you smile. So again, I won't spoil that for you, but this is one of those Godzilla films where, again, it transcends the medium. You don't just have to be a kaiju fan to like it. Like Gamera 3, Revenge of Eris, it is a film where I find that people who just like movies in general will watch it and actually really be taken with it. Because, wow, this is a great, great story. I mean, again, I think all the Godzilla films are pretty good films. I mean, some of them are better than others. And then you have some that are just so good that it doesn't matter who you are or what kind of movie you like. You'll watch it and at least say, yeah, that's not bad. I get that. I get why if people like Godzilla when I see that film. Doesn't mean they're going to feel that way about all the films, but it's one of those ones where, again, it transcends the genre and they can kind of appreciate it as a film. They may not want to go back and watch all the other Godzilla films, but they'll feel like they took away something significant by watching that one. And it's always great when the kaiju genre as a whole has these installments, because I feel that's what kind of really pushes them forward. There's a lot of movies in this genre, and they keep making them, but every so often you need that one that is really special to kind of give it that extra push so it doesn't kind of stall out. Because if you just give a bunch of films that are just they're pretty good, eventually they'll kind of run out of gas. But when you have those gems, those milestone films, that's what kind of keeps jump-starting the engine. It keeps it from just kind of sputtering out. And Godzilla vs. Destroyah is very much one of those installments. It's probably my second favorite Godzilla film of the Heisei era. And again, probably my top three. I mean, my three favorite Godzilla films are probably 84, if you guys have been following this channel, that's my favorite one. The original 54 Godzilla, and probably Godzilla vs. Destroyah, because again, it's just such a very special film that really treats Godzilla as a character. And a tragic character, and that's my favorite interpretation of Godzilla, because that's how I feel he is. He's a tragic character. He has the power of a god, and yet his life is, hell, essentially, for one reason or another. So, Godzilla vs. Destroyah. To say I highly recommend it is a bit of an understatement. But have you seen it? If so, what did you think? How does it stack up in the overall kind of Godzilla, pantheon of films? And just to kind of even bring it down a little bit, how do you feel it stacks up in just the Heisei era of Godzilla films? Out of those 6 movies, where does this one stack up for you? If you have not seen it, I will put a link in the description section below where you can pick it up, check it out, give it a watch. Please, please give it a watch. And honestly, even if you haven't seen the films leading up to it, I feel it does a very, very good job of telling a kind of a closed, concise story. It kind of lets you know what you need to know from the previous films, which quite honestly isn't as much as you would think, so you can understand what's going on. And then from there, you're locked into the story. So if you haven't seen the other films, don't feel like you're going to be lost, because you really won't be. Again, this film does a really good job of telling kind of its own story, and it just kind of alludes to the other ones where it needs to, just to give you the necessary amount. And again, it really does tell you everything you need to know about the previous ones. So it's great if you have seen them, because you need to see more Godzilla films. But if you haven't, don't let that stop you watching from this one, because I really think you'll walk away from it, understanding Godzilla as a character much better, and also understanding why he's so important to people like me. Because again, there's a lot of entries in the franchise where you might feel, okay, it looks a little goofy or a little silly, and you might say, okay, why does this matter so much to you? But I think when you watch this one, you understand why Godzilla is so important to us, and why the fans have such an emotional attachment and connection with this character, and why it's so special to us. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Peace!